Okay, I want to talk about boundaries, kids. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to talk about boundaries.
Hello, this is the Mae B Mindful podcast, and I am your host, Hannah Mae. I'm a mother of 6, conscious birth instructor and educator, spiritual growth facilitator, and certified hypnotist. This podcast is about inspiring hope, expanding awareness and consciousness in order to revolutionize the way we live and experience our lives. You can expect thought-provoking episodes each week spanning a range of topics, drawing from both my own journey of transformation and healing and working with others. I hope you find this podcast to be informative, refreshing, illuminating, and instrumental in your own soul's evolution and growth. Let's jump right in.
Because boundaries are really important, and you can be a boundary boss. If you want to be a boundary boss, you can be a boundary boss. And it doesn't mean you have to act like a boss. Like a lot of times there's this idea that having a boundary is some sort of a loud declaration of something, but it's not. Oftentimes, a boundary is a quiet, silent, energetic shift within yourself. And it's just something that you do for you in order to honor your energy and to safeguard your energy and to do the thing that is most loving and nurturing and kind for yourself. Right? So boundaries are the actions that are required in order to come out of codependency, in order to release yourself from toxic relationships and dynamics. And the only thing that stops us is you. Like we are the last holdout here with this, because nobody's saying you're not allowed to do that. And if they are, like, who are they to say that? So either way, even if somebody's actually saying that or threatening something, then we're just being dominated by fear, or coming into an agreement with a straight up lie because it's not true, right? Because like nobody's the boss of you, right? They're just not. And it's like, sometimes we tolerate things. Not sometimes. We often tolerate things way past their expiration date. And so, it's like, think about this for a second, like logically speaking, if you like cereal, if you got up every morning and you put like milk that's expired, that's disgusting and like clumpy, and you like pour that in your coffee every day and you just made yourself drink it because you're like, I don't have the right to throw this milk away. Like you would never do that, right? If you were going to eat it in your cereal and ruin your breakfast every morning, you would toss that shit the moment you got a whiff of like how expired it was. You'd be like, I'm not doing this. This milk is going down the sink and I'll go without milk before I drink this milk. Same thing with like if your phone breaks. You're not going to sit there trying to like fix your phone year after year. You're going to take that shit to the Apple store or wherever you got your phone, and you're going to get it fixed ASAP. And you're going to spend money to do so because you're like, I can't live without my phone. That's like my communication, my lifeline, my connection to the world. Like, how am I going to scroll Instagram if I don't have my phone? Just kidding. But seriously, I think the first thing is to take an honest look at what has expired in my life. If there is a relationship that has well past its expiration date, that you keep holding out for things to change, or maybe someone keeps dangling a carrot, or maybe there's some sort of, then you got to ask yourself why. Like, what's the gain in it? And there's always a gain in it, right? And it could just be that you don't have to show up and face your feeling and face your fear. I had a conversation with a teenager recently, and her teacher said to her, hey, do you sleep? How much sleep do you get? And she said, why do you ask? And he said, because I'm wondering how you have time to do anything. This teacher's really on her side, by the way. She's a really amazing student, very like high achieving. He said, I'm wondering how you have time to do anything because you say yes to everything. And I said, oh, that's really interesting. Is that something you want to change? She said, nope. I was like, well, you said no to that. And I said, well, why? And she said, because I'm able to sustain it. And it's okay, for now. This person's still really young. And while it gets to the point occasionally of crippling them because they're stretched, they're fatigued, they're stressed, it's not at the point where it's totally unmanageable yet. So we can tolerate something that's unhealthy for us when there is some sort of gain. And I said, well, what are you benefiting from it? She's like, I don't know. I like doing stuff. I said, well, why? She said, because if I'm not, she said, because I stretch myself too thin, but I notice that if I give myself time, then I'm bored and I really don't like not achieving. I said, oh, what is it in the not achieving or in that boredom that feels uncomfortable? And she said, it's the feeling. It's a really uncomfortable feeling. I said, oh, there's also the piece of, which was a part of the conversation, of not wanting to disappoint people, which is a whole nother thing, which is like kind of edging into codependency there, or can be a characteristic of it. But the gain at this point could be as simple as not having to feel that feeling, right? So that's something that's really worth taking a look at. Like what is it that I think I'm gaining? And is that actually benefiting me? And then what is it costing me? So, yeah, that's great. Like, that's nice. That's positive. You can focus on the gain here. You can focus on what you're getting. But what is it costing you? And on balance, if you weigh those things out, like, how does that measure out for you? And what's the impact it's having on your life? And a lot of times when we really look at this stuff, when we go, oh gosh, this is like costing me my peace of mind. This is costing me creative energy. This is costing me a lot. This is causing me to be reactive with my children. And like, I'm not like being the joy. This is costing me my joy. If something's costing me my joy, it's a clear, like non-negotiable, like it's got to go, And so for me, on my journey with this and having boundaries, I really had to learn how to self-advocate and really start to give myself permission. And this was, like I said, I was the last holdout. And this is the biggest thing for somebody, especially if they're healing from codependency and they're in this pattern of this operating from this belief system, that they don't have the right to do that. It's coming into the belief that no, in fact, they do have the right to do that. And in fact, that is their responsibility because nobody else is going to do it for them. So they have to step into their power and agency with this. But how do you do that if you don't believe you can? In the case of a woman that I was talking to recently, who was wanting to leave a toxic relationship with a sponsor, actually, in 12-step program. And I also have experience with this. There's nothing wrong with 12-step. 12 steps, so awesome. Like, I'm such a fan of it. The only problem is that there's people in it, and people have egos, and egos are a real pain in the ass sometimes. And they they kind of start to run the show here and there. So in this particular situation, this woman wanted to leave this relationship that she felt was not serving her anymore. It was not helping her recovery. And I shared with her my experience with this and how I stepped into agency in this and how it blew the roof off of my recovery, like in a good way, and how it just enriched my recovery so much when I left a relationship that was drawing my energy, that was actually really toxic and fostering codependency. When I had that boundary for myself and I finally got tired and I left that relationship, how many other incredibly beautiful, enriching relationships opened up for me, how many other connections, and how much my recovery was enhanced as a result of it, of me taking care of myself and giving myself permission to do that, right? And so I stayed in that relationship for years beyond its expiration date. I would be like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to be in this relationship anymore. But I wasn't giving myself permission to leave because of this programming and this idea and this belief. And, one of the primary predominant beliefs of codependency is that I'm responsible for the way you feel. I'm responsible for your reaction to something that I do to take care of myself, right? Which is, of course, absurd if you really look at that. But actually, the truth of that is I don't know how to tolerate the feelings in me that come up when you disapprove, right? And so this really comes back to really meeting ourselves. And there's a lot of healing work that needs to happen in healing codependency. And I did an episode on the inner child work and healing codependency and the importance of that in healing any of this stuff and coming out of these negative patterns and really being able to give ourselves permission and to feel safe, to provide the security and the safety for ourselves in order to have a boundary and know that like we're covered, we're held in that, like we are allowed. So anyways, with this other woman who's going through something similar that I was able to share my experience with to hopefully inspire, give her some hope, be like, this is what I did. I gave her a suggestion on something she could say in a really kind, loving way, just to take care of herself and to take ownership of her recovery and go another direction with it. And she was like, "Oh my gosh!" And I can't remember what it was, but it was something very simple. And she said, "Oh my gosh, I could never say that." And I said, "Well, why?" She's like, she couldn't explain why, but she just didn't feel like she could say that. And so there was no other reason that she couldn't say that other than she wasn't giving herself permission to do so. So this is like really one of the biggest obstacles in having boundaries for ourselves, is like the belief, right? That precedes whether we do or whether we don't. And what that is that we're coming into agreement, like what that conditioning is, what that belief is. But I can tell you, when you do, and so that's possible to address. That is absolutely possible to address simply by addressing it. And a lot of times we don't resolve things because we don't actually address them on the level that we need to. And you know, when you go into a belief, like you go subconscious with a belief, it's powerful. I mean, you can shift that straight away. You can also do that like in with the conscious mind. I mean, some of these things are much deeper, but when you pull apart the lie, when you really see how divisive and how destructive a lie is operating, then you can become willing to go, oh, well, why would I accept a lie, right? You only accept it if you believe it's true. So the moment that you see it for what it is, through with a little investigation and being willing to look at it, and you know, in doing so, it's uncomfortable because you're going to face your feelings, you're going to face these things that you haven't tolerated in yourself, that you've avoided and pushed away, which is why you're just showing up in something that's also really uncomfortable and just tolerating. So the moment that you see that it's a lie is the moment that you become willing to discard it, and you're like, well, you know, kick it to the curb, poof, it's gone. Like, no, I'm going to come into an agreement and alignment with the truth, because wow, that's empowering, right? And how do you do that? I mean, I can tell you how I do that. For me, there's the spiritual component here is really critical, because I need to access the source of truth, because sometimes I just don't know. I'm like, I don't know. I just don't know. Like I can feel confused. And it's like, for me, that has been the thing in developing that relationship, and knowing that I'm covered, and knowing that the powers of good are on my side, right? They stand there. They uphold me, you know? I mean, I talk to angels with this stuff, and I've had to like coach me through it, to know that I'm covered, like lift me up lest I dash my foot against a stone, because this stuff can feel really volatile, standing in the face of disappointment, of disapproval. This is the stuff that, these are threats to our security and our nervous system. It's about getting secure and providing those things that we need for ourselves. And part of the way, of course, that we provide and meet these needs for ourselves is by creating a secure containment and not allowing into our energy field that which is toxic and disruptive. I had a really wise fellow say to me when I was doing a piece of work, she said, she helped me so much. She said, it's time that you end this toxic conversation, you know? And this was a subtle shift. I started to talk about this earlier, that I needed to take for myself, and it didn't need to be loud. I didn't need to scream it from the hilltops. It's better if I don't sometimes. It's better if I take a quiet internal action. I need to pivot. I need to remove myself sometimes. And I don't need to engage in something that is causing me harm anymore. And I have the right to do that. One of the most incredible experiences that I had, I don't know if I've shared it on this podcast before, was when I was on a thread that felt bleh to me, like it felt like a toxic, there was all kinds of energy being thrown around, and I'm extremely sensitive to that. And most people are, they just disregard it actually, but some people are more sensitive than others. And being the codependent in recovery and empath that I am, it would really affect me and it would feel really bad, and it was pulling my energy. I didn't want to be on this chain anymore. At the time, I talked to my sponsor actually at the time, who I had done some coda work with, and she said, and I had judged some other people for like sometimes leaving the thread, right? And I'd be like, I'm never doing that. I'm standing my ground. I'm going to stay in this toxic relationship for as long as I live. And she said, and I told her the whole thing, and I was like, I was so self-righteous about it at the time. I was like, these people, they just leave and then they come back, and it's so lame. And she said, Hannah, she said, for the love of God, get off that chain. And by the way, stop judging people. You're kind of being an asshole for judging people. She was very funny and she said it very lovingly and endearingly. And what she actually said was, she said, and by the way, you're a real asshole for judging them. And she was like, that's exactly what you need to do for yourself. And I was like, oh, it was very sobering for me because she gave me permission. And in that moment, I was able to give myself permission, and I did. And when I did this, the most incredible thing happened, you guys. I left that fucking thread, and literally within an hour, I reached out to somebody. I didn't even like think it, I just did it. It was crazy. I reached out to somebody to pursue and follow up with something, a dream that I had been wanting to do for 20 years, you guys. That I had been avoiding. And why was I avoiding it? Why was that all of a sudden accessible to me? It was suddenly accessible to me because I removed my energy from something that was sucking it into this like toxic vortex, right? I took back ownership of that energy and it was free and it was able to be channeled creatively. And I'm an incredibly creative being. I think all people are, okay? Some people don't consider that they are because they consider themselves, they have a limiting definition of creativity. But by nature of being created, we are all by default creative. And we're here to create and manifest beautiful, we're here to create beautiful things in life. So I freed this up and it was incredible. And it was such a powerful example to me of like, holy shit, you know? I cannot afford to do this anymore. I've had opportunities like that again and again, and it's always just been so powerful. And I'll say on behalf of the woman who I shared with you who was wanting to leave a toxic dynamic in 12-step, she did end up leaving. She felt empowered and she did. And it was scary. It was that first leap. It was like really scary for her, which it always is. You're just like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? Like, I've never done this before. And she left that relationship and she stepped more deeply into her recovery. And she was so grateful. And I told her, I said, let me tell you something. This is a gift that you have given yourself. The gratitude will not end, okay? Like every day I look at my life and I see where a healthy action where I took care of myself and I honored myself and I had a boundary and I removed myself. As a result of doing that, I carry myself forward. And the gratitude for that is like, it's a compounding, evolving, building, beautiful effect. Because literally, I benefit every day from this. I benefit every day from something that I didn't give myself permission to do, that once I did and I took that action, everything changed. It's like I took myself out of one world and I put myself in another. And, that's like where the action is required. We can't just think our way into this. We can't just hope or wish our way into this. We actually have to take some action and be willing to do this. And obviously there's things that need to be put in place and support we need to set up for ourselves in order to do this. I really stand with you. And if I can offer you anything, it's you are allowed. And to have that permission where maybe you didn't give yourself permission because maybe at some point earlier in life, you were not given permission. It's like parents who don't allow their kids to say no. It's like, for the love of God, let your kids yell no occasionally at you because they need to be able to exercise that and to be able to own that for themselves and to feel empowered in that so that they're not going to be your kid forever. They're not going to be like in this apprenticeship of being a child forever. And they're going to need to know how to say no. They're going to need to know how to yell no sometimes. And not that they need to necessarily yell, but to be able to do so powerfully for themselves. And ultimately, as a parent, like that's what you want for your kid, right? I had an experience. I'm going to share one more experience that I had with you recently, and it was such a subtle shift. It was like that quiet, and it's exactly what I'm speaking to right now. This was about 4 years ago. I was in a really deep piece of healing work, and it was really intense. And there was so much. There was such a body of the body of pain that was coming up to be resolved was really intense. It was so intense, and it was so painful. And sometimes when we're working through this stuff and learning how to self-heal, we can encounter resistance because it can feel like too much. And so I was moving through this stuff, and it was starting to sort of like manifest and like eke out. And I was like trying to hold myself together, but sort of falling apart. Okay. And my husband one day said to me, he said, he'd never said this to me before. He said, "You are a hot mess." And it really got my attention. He said it was so much love that it almost felt like a compliment. And I was like, and it sort of is, I guess, because he was calling me a hot mess at least. But I laughed, I was so moved because what it did was it gave me permission to be a hot mess. And what I had been doing was trying to hold myself together, right? And this was the thing that actually needed to shift and change, and the floodgates needed to be open. And so when he said this really objectively, very non-judgmentally, just an observation, right? Like he wasn't attached to it one way or the other. It somehow gave me permission through that loving space that he held for me to go, oh, yeah, I am, and it's okay. And I realized that, what I needed to do was actually allow myself to fall apart. And so this was the thing that shifted and gave me permission to let the floodgates open, totally fall apart, and really allow me to rebuild from the foundation up and like put myself back together again, or allow myself to really be put back together again, came as a result of giving myself permission, which was just that belief. So, when we can give ourselves permission to have a boundary, then we have the boundary. Like it's that simple. That's what bridges that gap. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this sort of off the cuff inspired episode. I was just feeling a little bit impassioned about this as we come into contact with and have to navigate toxic situations all the time, and the need to keep ourselves on higher ground is really important, and also really possible, so that we can continue to like enjoy our life, and not get sucked into these things, because where we put our attention and where we put our focus is the direction that we're going to go. So if I'm like staring down the barrel of a gun, well, maybe that's not a great place to stare. Maybe I should, move into the open pasture, step into the sunlight, step into the sunlight of the spirit, and play with the other kids, like play where the play is at. Anyways, I love you guys. Be well. Look forward to your feedback on this. Don't forget to sign up. Okay. So long.
Thank you for tuning in to the Mae B Mindful podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. Your feedback helps us grow and improve. For more information, resources, and exclusive content, visit our website at maybemindful.com, or go ahead and follow us over on Instagram at Mae B Mindful. If you enjoyed this week's episode, please give me a follow, screenshot the episode, and go ahead and tag me until next week when I bring you another thought-provoking and inspiring topic. Until then,